Welcome back to the Aging Athletically podcast. I'm Hilary Cairns, and on this show, I talk with athletes, coaches, experts, and everyday competitors about training, performance, resilience, and what it means to continue pushing ourselves over time. Today's a little bit different. I thought it would be a good idea to check in without a guest. So I actually don't have anyone here with me today. And I'm just going to talk for a little bit. We'll see how this goes. I would say that I'm nervous, but maybe that's not the right word for it. I just don't have any idea how this will go. Thankfully, I've got a wonderful editor, Tarek, who can cut out all the dumb stuff and make it into something coherent. That's my hope. So, Aging Athletically is 18 episodes in, and I just thought it would be a good time to kind of reflect on the podcast, what I'm seeing, and then also just emphasize that I would love to hear from people about what you would like to see. And so, in thinking back, I remember why I started the podcast in the first place. I had this idea a long time ago, probably a year or two ago. I really wanted to talk to other people like myself who are continuing to compete and also just be excited about sports later in life into our 50s, 60s, 70s, as you've seen with various episodes that I've had. I obviously started the podcast with a co-host, Michael Wardian, and he's not with the podcast anymore. So I've gone a bunch of episodes now solo, and I would say I still have a lot of enthusiasm for the conversations, and I'm enjoying doing it solo. And would appreciate any feedback that people have on that as well. If you're feeling like, oh, you should find a new co-host, or just keep at it. Personally, I'm really enjoying the conversations. So what I would say is it's kind of an expensive hobby that I have right now because this is all self-funded, and it's a fun hobby though. So it's worth the investment. But most importantly, I think what I wasn't really anticipating was how much I would enjoy just talking with people and learning people's stories. I have felt so motivated by what I'm hearing from people. I thought I was pretty self-motivated. I The people that I've talked with have actually come into play for me a lot in my own competitions, my own training, just thinking, okay, Gabby said, Gabby told me how much she loves being in the water and the peace that she feels in the water. Let's see if I can find that feeling also. And Julie told me to focus on form in the water. And, you know, Chris's advice was to have this mantra. So I just really have appreciated that people's stories have come into play for how I'm thinking of myself as an athlete and how I'm approaching my own training and competition. So this episode is not intended to be just me talking about myself, but I thought I would just give you a little bit of update on where I am with competition and training. So I was actually supposed to be doing a triathlon today. It's dreary and rainy here in Washington, D.C. I'm not doing it because I've had a bit of a foot issue, which came up at a triathlon I did around a month ago. I just felt something weird when I got off the bike and didn't think about it again. But anyway, it has progressed a little bit. I was able to smartly, I think, just back way off on running so that I was able to compete at the Eagleman Half Ironman, which was 2 weeks ago. But I'm trying not to turn what feels like a very small thing into a potentially larger thing. For those of you who are runners, I think you can probably relate that we like to, I don't know, just deceive ourselves when things are not feeling good and you start testing things all the time. Let me just hop on this foot and hop up and down. And I know I'm not supposed to be running, but let me just run across the street and see how it feels. So I'm not doing that. And I'm not doing it because I've actually experienced a traumatic experience, which is that what was probably a stress reaction turned into a stress fracture, turned into a full fracture 6 years ago. And that has really stayed with me. That when you feel pain, there are some things that you can run through and some things that feel like, come on, like listen to what's happening. So anyway, my foot actually feels very good. And I did see a doctor, and the doctor said it's joint pain and not my worst nightmare, which was that I was getting another stress reaction. And he encouraged me to actually kind of keep running. And I said, well, I'm just going to take, 2 weeks or so with no running and see how that goes. So anyway, I'm not running right now. And I did Eagle Man 2 weeks ago, had, I think, a very solid race. It was extremely hot. And I really revised my own thinking about how I was going to approach the race, and it paid off. So had a great swim. And I think primarily that was because I have a new wetsuit, which I hate wearing wetsuits. And the reason I hate them so much is because I feel that they choke me. And so I got a larger wetsuit. So it's not the size that I would normally wear. It's a little bit loose or looser than I'm used to, but I could breathe and I felt so comfortable in the water, even though I'm a strong swimmer and I should feel comfortable without a wetsuit, which I do. But it was just a totally different situation for me to not feel that my neck was being cut off. Anyway, so I had a great swim for me. Beautiful day, no bumps in the water, which was huge. The bike, I had not been doing a ton of bike training, and so I really didn't know what I could do on the bike, but I felt very strong. It was very hot, so I was very careful about taking in a lot of liquids. Maybe took in a little bit too much carbs because my stomach was not super happy. But I had to really revise my run goals, and I think this is something where time and years in competition, you just learn to be smarter, and so thankfully, I listened to my own advice and revised my time goals completely, stopped, like, came to a complete stop, but walked through every aid station, put ice down my front, dumped water on myself, etcetera, etcetera. Anyway, so very, very hard race, but I was happy with the result. I did qualify for the World Championships. I did not take my slot because I am a cautious biker and the World Championships are in Nice and it's a very hilly course and I do not like biking downhill. And I just knew that it's just not the right course. It's not the right course for me. And as much as I would really like to compete at a World Championship again, it needs to be maybe next year when it's in Chattanooga. I'm not going to do Nice. Anyway, so there's that. And then I think I mentioned when I was talking with my daughter Paige that I had gone to Ottawa to do a high rocks competition, was really hoping to be able to do my fastest time there, but I was super sick. And, in retrospect, you don't really realize how sick you are until you feel better and you're like, whoa, I really was sick. So anyway, I really was sick. So that didn't go quite as planned. And then update on my daughter. We talked about her running grandma's marathon. She did run grandma's. She had knee pain going into it and almost did not do the race. Decided the day before, after doing a short run, that she would give it a go and ended up, her knee was okay for the race, but she had some stomach issues. So she soldiered through, and I was so proud of her. And I think she was proud of herself too for continuing on. I mean, I think we had talked about if you're in pain, you're injuring yourself, that's a reason to stop. Slowing down is not really a reason to stop. I mean, obviously she gets to make her own choices, but we kind of talk through what our minds do during races and when it feels like you're kind of quitting versus making smart decisions. So I think she was able to revise her own goals, and one of them became to stick with it. And she did awesome, actually. She was not the time she wanted to run it all, but I think she pushed through in a smart way. She is still trying to figure out what's going on with her knee, so she's going to get an MRI done. But let's see. So I have this little foot thing going on. I'm taking off some time from running, and I feel, and I do think a lot of this has been the conversations with other people. I feel maybe a sense of calmness about this injury that I haven't felt when I've had other aches and pains. And I think part of it is I have so many different things that I can do instead. So I've set some other goals for myself. I'm working on a pull up goal, or my goal is to be able to do 10 full pull ups holding 20 pounds, a 20-pound dumbbell in between my legs. So I'm up to 7 full pull ups holding 10 pounds. and we'll see if I make my goal. And I've got some wall sit goals. So I've just set some other goals for myself. And I guess I feel so fortunate that my body has let me do so many things that when it speaks up and says, there's something a little bit wrong, that I should pay attention to it. Of course, then figure out how to challenge myself in other ways. So yesterday, it's like, well, I can't do a long run, so I'm going to bike 100 miles, which was cool. I did 102 miles on my gravel bike and felt solid doing that. Although I must say, when I got to 80, I just thought I could have just done 80 miles, but now I'm 20 miles from home. Why did I do this again? And then, you go to your mantras. I can do hard things. I can do this. You're strong, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it got me to the end. I did run out of water toward then, which wasn't great. So I have learned that uh, tailwind powder, so I didn't have any water to put it in. Tailwind powder is really yummy. You just eat it. It's like Fun Dip or whatever. Thing that we had when we were little kids where you dip a, dip, dip a stick into the powder. Well, that's what tailwind powder tastes like. Anyway, it got me to the finish line, which was my house, and I felt fine. Okay. A couple of other updates about myself. And again, this is not supposed to be just me talking about myself. I really am going to get to, I promise, about just some of the things that I've learned. And hopefully, some of you all could probably recite some of these things that we've learned together from listening to the amazing guests that we've had so far. We had Dr. Shaw on, who is a sports cardiologist who happens to be my doctor as well. And I have had some results that show I have early, I don't even know. Somebody could explain it better than I, but kind of markers for heart, like I have a lot of family history of heart disease. So kind of mildly elevated cholesterol, mildly elevated blood pressure, evidence of calcium, something, something. Anyway, so the option was to start taking a statin, and I'm pretty resistant to medication. And so I pled, and he agreed. And this is not a HIPAA violation because I'm telling you all my own health things, but agreed that I could have a couple of months to try to revise my diet, which I think it's interesting. People make a lot of assumptions about athletes' eating habits, like, oh, you're so fit and you must just eat really well and take care of yourselves in all the right ways. And I'm like, yeah, well, I kind of eat whatever I want, which maybe is coming back to bite me at this point. So I've made some like significant changes, and they've been actually really easy to make. And part of it is because I'm very motivated to see if I can get my numbers to be okay without having to take a medication. So what this means for me is I've stopped having like a lot of chocolate and full fat dairy. So I've gotten rid of dairy, which I kind of miss, but I really just miss chocolate. I had to be a little bit more creative just with other things to take in. So I'm trying not to have saturated fats, whatever. I have 3 months to get things right. If anybody has tips that you want to share, I would welcome them. Okay, last thing. When I was pondering talking today, it's been on my mind for a while. I was thinking, gosh, I'm really not I'm not a journalist. I don't have any kind of training in production and podcasting or reporting, but it is super fun. And then I remembered back, I don't know why it didn't occur to me earlier, but when I was a little kid, when you'd have to say, what do you want to be when you grow up? There were two things that I consistently said when I was little. One was to be an oceanographer because I loved watching the Jacques Cousteau shows. And, he'd be underwater with the sea life. That looked amazing. But I also wanted to be a sports broadcaster. I'm not sure what happened to my dreams. They definitely didn't go in that direction because I went to liberal arts degree and law degree, and that those things kind of faded away. But maybe doing this podcast was actually my own coming back to the thing that I've been wanting to do my whole life. I'm not sure, but it was just interesting to think about that, why maybe I'm enjoying it. And I don't know about you all, but when I when I was little, I just loved watching sports so much. I think that's why I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. Loved watching football, really loved watching ABC Wide World of Sports. That's a really hard thing to say. The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat where the skier is going off the ski jump and he falls down. And anyway, I think that just gave me a love of sports in addition to playing them. Okay, enough about me. So I wrote down a little list. So I did prepare for this, but just one of the joys that I've found in hosting the podcast is realizing that although the guests have come from different places, different backgrounds, they're doing different sports, they're from different generations, a lot of people come back to some of the same ideas. And I thought that it would be useful to just kind of talk through what some of those ideas are, not as an end, because I'm not ending the podcast. So I'm hoping this will go on for a long time. And it's not that the people that I'm interviewing going forward will necessarily agree with some of these ideas. They probably will for some, but wanted to get to continue to learn more about other people as well. Anyway, here are some of the things that I have, or themes, I guess, that keep coming up to me, which is, first off, we just like really underestimate what's possible for ourselves. And hearing people who have kind of defied expectations. I think the first thing you got to do is defy it for yourself, defy your own expectations or shift your expectations. And then other people's expectations can shift too. Just think about Alice Green starting her track career in her 50s, Gene Dykes doing 200-mile races in his 70s, Gabby Rose coming back and competing in the Olympic trials 20 years after she had been in the Olympics. I mean, these expectations that I think we even had for ourselves can be defied. Second thing that it keeps coming up over and over again is consistency, and consistency versus heroics, really. I mean, it's just continuing to train, continuing to challenge ourselves, continuing to try different things, try different ways of doing things, and just doing it even when you don't always want to, sometimes when you really want to, but being consistent and continuing to just try. That's come up over and over again. Obviously, when I've asked the question, what's one habit you swear by that's helping you age athletically, a lot of the guests have talked about strength training. And so that has come up so many times. And I think strength plus durability, it fits also, I think, with consistency and just continuing to set ourselves up to be able to do these activities for a long time. Part of it is being strong, being full body strong, and not just solely for the individual sport that someone is competing in. Another thing which has come up over and over again is community and the importance of having people around you that inspire you, that you're accountable to, that are accountable to you to show up for training, for races, that you maybe are mentoring, you're being mentored by. That's come up a lot too. And I know that that's huge for me, even though many of the athletes that I've talked to have said, you know, I'm a runner, I'm a swimmer, I would do these things even if there weren't races. They still do talk about the relationships that they've built through their sports. That I think is a primary driver for what keeps them going. Sure, we might still do these things on our own, but there's nothing like being able to do it alongside someone else. All right, another thing which has come up is joy that people are finding in the activities. Yes, this stuff can be tedious at times. I don't always want to go. on that ride, or I don't always want to lift. I kind of would rather lie on the couch, read a book, and sometimes I make that choice also. But there is a joy that people are deriving from the activities, and part of that is the activity itself, part of it is what's around it, but it is bringing joy, and so and finding joy in the activity, so that's come up a lot. I don't know if I've just picked the most amazing people to interview, which, I am careful about who I'm asking to be on the show. I don't just have someone show up without having had a conversation with them first to make sure that it's a good fit both every way around. But there are a lot of optimistic people. So I think there's a level of optimism, I think, amongst people who are continuing to stay really active and compete and challenge ourselves. There's a kind of like a can do, I can do it attitude that permeates. And I appreciate that. And again, I'm learning too from others about how they're using their own spirit to keep themselves motivated. And let's see. Also, people have talked about being flexible, and I'm not talking about physical flexibility, although I think that's important too. Definitely something I need to be working on, but flexibility around their training, around trying new things like different types of recovery and different ways of approaching their training, that maybe taking more rest than they did when they were younger, doing more strength work, again, just kind of shifting and making adjustments that are prolonging our ability to continue at high levels. And let's see. I also think what I felt in talking with the athletes is that, yeah, maybe the times are slightly different for those athletes where the time is the answer, or is the end result. They may be shifting a little bit as we get older, but in so many ways, we're actually stronger and better athletes than when we were younger. And, some of that just comes from the consistency and the many years of training and just what your body can withstand. But I think it's also about attitude and focus on continuing the effort, continuing to challenge ourselves, that permeate or it becomes or transforms us into really better athletes. Personally, while I do I'm sore at times, tired at times, I feel much better physically now than I did 10, 15 years ago, for sure. And again, I might be a little bit slower, but in terms of my recovery, how I feel between workouts, I definitely feel better. Now, granted, maybe I was exhausted because I had 3 little kids, and that was part of what was making me be exhausted. But in terms of the workouts, I feel better, and I imagine that others do as well. And maybe that's also just taking better care of ourselves and learning from all of the new information that comes out around the importance of fueling, the importance of sleep, and just taking care of those small things which add up. And maybe when you're in your 20s and 30s, they just aren't priority. And once you prioritize them, it actually really makes a difference. So, those are just some of the things that have come up, I think, as consistent themes. And again, I have a whole bunch of other guests that I'll have on, and they may or may not have thoughts on these themes. They might have their own themes that are coming up that will add to some other things that we're learning. But that's what I'm seeing so far. So just looking ahead, I do have lined up a couple of Olympians that'll be coming on soon, nutritionists. So these are in the short term, and would really love to hear from anyone if you have thoughts on people or topics that you would like me to pursue. I welcome the opportunity to hear from you. So thanks for listening to this little episode of me blabbing, talking with myself, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks for listening to Aging Athletically. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, give it some stars, and share it with a friend, training partner, or anyone who might enjoy hearing stories from athletes who continue to challenge themselves as they get older, or from experts who help us train smarter. You can find Aging Athletically on Instagram and YouTube, and I'd love to hear from you. Send me a message there or email me at agingathletically@gmail.com with feedback, guest ideas, or topics you'd like me to explore. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, keep training, keep challenging yourself, and keep aging athletically.